This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Devon Wieters. And we're going to talk about the hidden challenges of people with disabilities. But I want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to talk to people from all over the world. We've been on the air since 2016. This is like episode 1175. And we just like to be able to bring people's stories. We've got your URL, https:// wheelwithit.com. That'll be fully clickable for anybody who wants to check that out later. But before we get into that, we like to ask people on the show, before we get to your story, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me is really I see a lot of changes that need to be made in the current US system for Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid that would really help people with disabilities. Because right now it's not set up as best as it could be for people with disabilities. And I do what I do to hopefully see some change in that area. So we can talk all about that.
Yeah, because I think it's very kind of shocking today. My daughter has disabilities. She's on the SSI, and she's an artist. And in her community of what the artists that are disabled, they're running into probably similar issues where, if she gets a gig and she earns a certain amount of money, then she won't get part of her social security. they'll they'll reduce how much money she gets,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's like if you get too much money, you won't be able to have certain benefits. It just seems it's not very encouraging or understanding of the situation people are in, right?
No, you're basically incentivized to not work because if you had to choose between the Medicaid waiver that funds your $40,000 wheelchair and a $36,000 a year job, you're going to choose the Medicaid waiver that funds your $40,000 wheelchair out of sheer survival. So,
Yeah, that's not
um,
fair. It doesn't
yeah, it's
seem
not
fair.
fair.
No, it's because like you want people to be able to do what they can do. Like if you're an artist, you'd hate to see an artist being like kept from their art, or somebody who has like a talent. And then because, like you said, you make under a certain, level of qualification. Like you said, the cost of a wheelchair versus the salary of the job. It's a disincentive. Like you're not incentivized to actually be who you are, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much said it all there.
Yeah, it just seems like, and there's some people that just don't seem to understand. Like I know my daughter's a big advocate of the Americans for Disabilities Act, and she wants it to get better. But there are people that want to just get rid of it. you know,
Oh my
they-
god, I didn't know that. There are people that want to get rid of the ADA. That's
yeah, yeah,
ridiculous.
the current administration wants to just wipe it out.
Well,
Uh,
I don't know about that, but
yeah, yeah. There's well, I could get into it, but there are people that are not. They want to disincentivize. They feel that people who are disadvantaged, they don't they don't have the mindset to understand it, and they don't believe in it, right? They believe in some really radical ideas that are coming down the pike, but people will find out. Um, I won't go that way, but the information I have is like people with disabilities already have stigma. My daughter has like people are not, they're kind of mean. Uh,
what does your daughter have?
well, she has she doesn't have
If you
uh,
don't mind me asking.
yeah, well, she has a disability that's about she's neurodivergent to the extent where she got SSI because of her neurodivergence, and also she has issues with cortisol, lack of cortisol. So she has basically it has a lot of trouble in public and some being able to be out in the world because of those issues. So some of it's like mental disability, that people don't see that sometimes. So physical disabilities sometimes are easier for people to understand than sometimes mental disabilities. So then you still can end up being on SSI, and she's on SSI.
Yeah, yeah, SSI is a bureaucratic nightmare a lot of the time. So
Yeah, it ends up being hard because she's making decisions now where she's an art director, right? And she's starting to get close to where she might actually start to earn enough money to maybe get off of it, but she still feels like she should have some of the benefits. So
yeah, I
it's just
know because that's what I'm worried about is if I get a six-figure job with money to get off of it, or even just a regular job with money to get off of it, and something catastrophic happens, what do you do? Now,
yeah,
luckily, my parents are uh, well off enough to help me, but I know that's not the situation for everybody. So,
yeah. I just think that there should be an understanding in terms of the medical benefits, and because a lot of times, like in private industry, like the insurance is not as good as it used to. I mean, I'm 57 years old, and I work for a living. I'm a software guy. The benefits I had in 1994, and I had cancer. Right, it paid for my cancer surgeries. I didn't have to pay a lot of money. I was working. I had a health plan, right, from private industry. Now today, like if you have that same, if I had that cancer today, I'd have to pay out of pocket tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket, right? Even though I have insurance, they would make
yeah,
me pay money
yeah,
I didn't have to pay back in the 90s. So I mean, it's just gotten worse across the board.
luckily, I have fantastic insurance because I have private insurance that's really good in addition to the Medicaid. But um yeah, across the board, it's gotten so much worse. I hear horror stories from my friends. I'm like, I cannot believe they're not covering that for because of that reason. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's so many things that you have to pay out of pocket. Like it'll have $7,000, $9,000 deductibles. I had insurance companies that don't pay for ambulances, right? I, I,
Yeah,
I had a health
that's
plan that
ridiculous.
wouldn't
Yeah.
pay for an ambulance. It's just like you had to pay out of pocket for the ambulance. And imagine if you have to call an ambulance because you have a condition where you have to use it and then they don't cover it. And it's like it's like it's just a nightmare in terms of like understanding how to help people who are in situations, right? And I just think there's ableism, like the idea of ableism versus and not understanding people with disabilities. And what do you the kind of thoughts on like the way people perceive disability in this country?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ableism baked into the system. You and I might have different political views, but we can agree on a lot of things, and that's one of the things that we can agree on. So
Yeah, because I think it makes it hard when people don't have empathy. You
yeah,
know,
it's very hard when we have able-bodied people that have never been affected by disability or had one in their life making decisions that will affect disabled people. Um, Yeah, we should at least be at the table when Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security decisions are made, but you know, awareness is starting to be raised for it now, which I'm
yeah,
grateful for and I try to do. So that's why I'm here with you. So, you know.
yeah. So I mean, the SSI Restoration Act and SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. Can you talk about those things?
So there are four bills in Congress, and the two bills you just mentioned, there are two of those that would reform the Social Security slash Medicare and Medicaid system because they go by the same limits in most cases. To allow people with disabilities to work and get married and keep their benefits. The SSI Restoration Act would raise the asset limits for people with disabilities and eliminate the marriage penalty, which is where they count the spouse's benefits against you, whether or not the spouse is receiving the services. And the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act would just raise the asset limit, excuse me, to theoretically allow people to get married because the asset limits would be higher. And it would affect how they count salaries too, I believe.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if currently if you make $0 and marry somebody that makes like 40,000 in Virginia, then you would make too much money to qualify for the waiver because the spouse is 40,000. And I believe that those acts would not only modify the asset limits, but they would modify how they count salaries. So you could get married and still have the services.
yeah. 'Cause I guess they're assuming that you're going to go on your spouse's health plan,
Yes.
and one of the
And
yeah, and that might not be the
they're
best. Yeah,
assuming that two people can live together more economically than if they lived alone. But what they're not considering is that a wheelchair costs $46,000. So, you know,
yeah. And sometimes, like your spouse's health plan might not actually give you the benefits that you're currently getting.
yes.
And so the assumption that it's gonna give you what you and so it's a disincentive for something that maybe they think they're incentivizing. So it seems like a misunderstanding of the actual situation. So you wondered, have they even talked to enough disabled people to understand the problem?
The answer is no. I can pretty much tell you that.
Yeah. So it's like in terms of like when you're trying to get people to advocate for you, are there organizations that you're part of or groups that you work with that are pushing these points of view or these positions for people with disabilities?
I don't work with any of these specific groups, and just off the top, I don't agree with everything of what they do. But um, first of all, everybody needs to watch Patrice the movie on Hulu. It's about a couple that wants to live together and get married, but they can't because of the way the Social Security slash Medicare slash Medicaid benefits are set up. And it is hilarious. So it's not going to be woe is me, but it's tough in spots, but it's hilarious too. Um, and one organization that is doing a lot is DREDF. That's the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. And I think it's dredf.org, but you can Google DREDF and it'll pop right up. And they have all the agenda of everything we're trying to do laid out there, from transportation being more accessible to the Medicare and Medicaid waivers to reproductive stuff. So everything's laid out there. They have cool little fact sheets that you can look at. All of that stuff.
So on your own, what have you been doing to kind of push? You have you have your URL there. So what happens with your if people connect with you on that?
So I recently did a podcast with the director and producer of the movie I just mentioned, Patrice the movie. You can find that by going to wheelwithit.com/marriage. Wheelwithit.com/marriage. They were really fun. And on that page, you can learn all about the um, marriage penalty and why it's harmful, and learn all about the system and the way that it needs to be improved. Um, every situation is different. So the video that describes the system isn't exactly my situation, but it's a lot of people's situation.
Mhm.
But the conditions that they have to live under is my situation. So you'll see when you get there. It all explains it in the John Oliver video. So you can watch that. You can watch the podcast with Patrice. Um, and um, so that's a little thing you can do. It also has a link to where you can write your senators saying, "Hey, I support these two bills." Um, and yeah, that's what I'm doing, and I'm getting up here on podcast with you.
So you're a podcaster yourself. You have your own podcast.
Yes.
And when did you start doing a podcast? And what is it? You're advocating for the same things we've been talking about on your podcast?
Yes. It started as a Survivor podcast in 2018 because I'm a Survivor super fan. But people already had the market cornered on that, so I just decided to switch to what I knew, and this is what I knew. So um that's how we got here.
Do you find the podcasting world is a place that you like? I've been a podcaster since 2016. I really like the form. Do you feel that it actually is supportive of what you're trying to do?
Oh yeah, I love the form. I love that people with disabilities are getting into podcasting now because there's so many like remote options that you can do. A lot of people film or record their podcast exclusively remotely, which makes it great for disabled people because they don't have to go anywhere.
Hmm.
So, and transportation is a challenge
Yeah.
for a lot of us. So, it's really inclusive in that way. And I just feel like that if you're not bound by like a big cable network, then you can hear like a lot of perspectives that people would normally want to hear. So podcasting is great for that too.
Yeah, cause you can get your message out, like, the net we have, worldwide reach. It's not just the US, you can reach people all over the world, and, like, it is really great for, I don't have to have somebody come in the studio, you can talk to people all over the world, and we do that, and I think it just allows different points of view, allows people who are maybe, you know, don't have the means to get to a studio for whether or not they physically can't get there or they can't do it monetarily or they're in this fit, they're in another country so they couldn't get to you. I think it's just a great forum to have this to have open discussions.
Yes.
So one of the things I like to talk about is like in terms of if you having cerebral palsy and the navigating in life and doing what you do today, maybe you can kind of talk about that your experience.
Um, yeah, it's definitely been a challenge in some areas. It's definitely affected the way I see the world in a very unique way. I look at things a lot more nuanced than the average person does. Um, but I've had a great support system around me, so that's made it easier.
Yeah, it's good to have the support because I think that's a place where some people maybe don't have it and they have to they're subject to whatever support they can actually get, and it's not it's good to have a good support system that's like at the microcosm level rather than the macrocosm. So if you have somebody that's like with the family structures that can help people, but like overall as an advocate for people, like there are people that don't have people who can help them, and I would think that those are where the system might be falling down, right? If you don't have a good support system, then you're dependent on whatever society gives you.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for the support system that I have. Count. Oh, sorry. I'm grateful for the support system that I have.
That's cool. Um, but in terms of trying to advocate for changes in the policies you were talking about, like the marriage penalty, and basically the wage penalty, like um, for like if you get a job that pays you more than what your wheelchair is worth, and then you lose your benefits. Maybe talking more about your experience with that. Have you hit some like personal lessons learned or stories you can relate to the audience?
I've never lost my benefits completely, but I did do a like 6 month paid internship, and now um, Social Security sent me a letter saying, "Oh, we overpaid you because it took them six more than 6 months to process the fact that I had a job. So now I owe them $2,000. So they're going to reduce my payment until they get the $2,000 back."
Yeah, my daughter's run into that. because
Yeah.
she started to do, she's an artist, and artists usually don't make money, but she started actually making money with her art, and then had to report it, and it took a while, and then suddenly they said, "Well, we're not paying you for like what you said, 6 months, because you got this check from a gallery." And it's not like, well, you're not always going to get the check from the gallery because art isn't like a 9 to 5. It's like art is like you have a piece, you sell it, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's like it's not consistent, so it's kind of inconsistent. So it's a kind of a hard thing to predict. You can't predict. It's like that you're going to get X amount of money.
Yeah, so it's a very nasty situation. And I was just looking up the SSI Restoration Act to make sure I was correct. And what it would do is eliminate the marriage penalty and raise the asset limits. And s it wouldn't necessarily disregard the salary, but it would eliminate the marriage penalty and raise the asset limits.
Oh,
So
okay.
that is still needed. So
Yeah, that's still needed. But I think, yeah, it makes sense to also, if you look at, people who do gig work. Gig work sometimes is not, and that's something like if you can do virtual gig work, and sometimes you might not get a steady salary. So you could actually hit like a threshold. Well, 1 month you made it, now you can't get your Social Security. You can't get the money because you went over the limit.
yeah.
But the next
And
month
like
you're not.
in
But
like some situations, some situations are stricter than others. But sometimes if you put like $20 over the limit in like a big account, then they cut you off. It depends on the state. If you It's mostly for Medicaid reasons and disability reasons, but if you put sometimes if you're like $20 over, they
Mhm.
will cut you off. I've heard stories of that happening.
Yeah, and that's really it seems kind of nitpicking, but I guess the rules are the rules. But it does seem like there needs to be, it's a challenge, and maybe people aren't putting themselves in your shoes, right? They're not putting themselves in where you are, and realizing how much you know red tape they're putting on like a life. It's making it so you have to think about things that other people don't have to think about, right? How does that really affect like you being able to be, uh, you know, make your life without having to worry about the red tape?
Yeah, that's definitely needed. There's definitely a lot of red tape, and I'm just looking it up. Sorry about that. It would also allow the resource limit to adjust for inflation, the SSI Restoration Act,
Oh yeah.
and currently it's not allowed to do that, only cost of living. So,
Well, that's kind of tragic, and we went through a lot of inflation. So if your money's really not worth, because the price of eggs went up, price of bread went up, things go up, and it's like you can't buy what they think you can buy. So
yes, I do know these acts. I just get really scared when I'm on podcasts. Like,
that's fine.
I don't want to tell people wrong, so I look it up.
No, that's like it's like we can talk more about your experience, with living with your cerebral palsy, and then being in in your career in terms of what you want to do as a person, right? Have you felt limitations in terms of what you want to do? Have you been able to get to what you want, but it's been like a struggle in terms of like trying to have your voice heard?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like this so much is because it's more of a level playing field than a quote unquote normal job would be. Um, and people that think this isn't a job haven't done it for 20 minutes because it is a job that I'm currently making no money for, but I love doing it anyways. And it's more of a level playing field because you don't have to worry about the accessibility issues. You are your own boss, so you don't have to worry about, bosses who might not understand your situation. So it's definitely more of a playing field here than it would be in a normal job.
Yeah, because people, I think there's this whole idea like stigma, because there's a stigma on it. But if you get onto a level playing field, like a virtual workplace like this, like then that doesn't come to play as much, right? You don't have to deal with um like if you have to go out, like if you have to go out and physically, if you had to go to a television studio or a radio studio to do this, that would like if you theoretically like that's a lot of work, right? That puts you through a lot of things that an ableist person doesn't think about.
Yeah, and not all able-bodied people are ableist. Like very few of them are like intentionally ableist, but they just don't think about it. So
Yeah, because they may not think about the accessibility that's needed. Because they just it's not that they didn't want to think about it, but they didn't have to. So if they didn't have to, then they don't consider like it's accessibility issues for you. Do you ever,
yeah.
yeah, if you have to run in, just in your life, do you have to run into a lot of accessibility issues, or because we live in a world where you can have things like Amazon and delivery services, um, is that as much of an issue as it was maybe like 5 years ago?
I still run into quite a bit of um accessibility issues. The most troubling for me are public bathrooms.
Hmm.
Um Public bathrooms are not accessible by any means. Even the accessible ones are not very accessible. Um and public transportation are two of the biggest things because I do have parents that can drive me, but they don't want to drive me everywhere, and I love them to death, but I don't want them to have to drive me everywhere. So,
Yeah. So you're saying like buses
yeah.
and trains and subways aren't really as accessible as they need to be.
No, and on my waiver, I'm supposedly entitled to get something called paratransit, which is an accessible bus system that's very, very good from what I've heard, but I haven't got a chance to use it yet because I'm not in the paratransit service zone. I'm
Oh, you're
like,
not in
I
the zone.
thought I was on the waiver. I thought I could get paratransit. Apparently not. They don't come to my house.
So you,
So,
even though you're authorized for it, they won't come out of the. You have to live in a certain zone to get it.
yes.
That doesn't seem like it makes sense. That seems like an issue there. That's a bureaucratic issue to me.
I know.
That doesn't make a lot
I
of
would
sense.
like to see that in the federal reforms too. Like if you qualify for a waiver, then if you live in 99% of locations, you get paratransit. I
Yeah,
would
it
like
is
to
like
see
just bring the
paratransit
drive the van
expansion.
to where you are. Like if a van exists in the other zones, like how many people are they actually servicing? Like why can't they take it and drive it to you?
I know, but it's ridiculous, but
Yeah, that seems like a bureaucrat not understanding like the need or really looking at the situation, giving you the ability. Like if you want to go out and you need to go out, you should be supported in that, especially if it's a benefit that you're supposed to have. So that to me is like as just a citizen, he's like you want things to work right. You don't want to see things that don't make sense to me. To me, that doesn't feel like it's like working. So that's a good example of the type of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely an example.
So another thing in terms of just like lessons in your life that you've learned from growing up, can you kind of tell stories of you know things that you've had uh you know had to go through, or success stories you want to give people like a picture of what you've had to go through?
I definitely had to go through a little bit more than the average person would medically. So I have developed a very mild case of white coat syndrome. Um, very, very mild. I don't like freak out or anything, but, and I had doctors that I love, but yeah, hospitals are not good for me. I get anxious in hospitals a lot.
Hmm.
That's one thing. Um, I definitely learned to look at things in a more nuanced way. And I think it's made me a very empathetic person because a lot of people tend to look at people that are on government services and are like, oh, they're just, don't want to work or living off the, government check. But it's a lot deeper than that. In a lot of cases. So, um, yes, there is a lot of abuse of it, but also a lot of things and red tape, as we've talked about, that keep people from working. So I don't automatically make assumptions about people that are on these services. Um, as much as I would before I was on the services. So
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of I think people don't always you know look at life. There's a lot of individualism. Like if you're in a society with a lot of individualism, they always put a lot of personal responsibility on everybody, right? But if you're born with a disability, and like I'm a diabetic, like I couldn't do anything about it. I'm a type 2 diabetic, so I have to live with that consequence. And some people could say, well, you ate too much sugar or you did this. No, I'm a genetically a diabetic, right? It wasn't so like when people have a problem, it's not like they want to have a problem. They sometimes just like that is the problem. That is who they are. That is, if they have issues in life, it's not because they don't want to do what other people are doing. It's like they have to deal with where they are, right?
yeah, so that's definitely something people don't think about.
Yeah, because you have to kind of put yourself in other people's shoes, but that's not always the thing that people want to do. They want to just you know uh, look at everyone as having like the same capacity, and everybody has the ability to contribute to society, but sometimes people might need to have some help, like, so because we have these tools now, your voice can be heard on a podcast.
Yeah.
Previously, you would have had to have the bus or the transport to get you to the radio station, right?
Yes.
And
So
now you can actually show people what you're doing, right? People can hear your voice. So we kind of leveled the playing field there, but in other places, it's still not fully level.
yeah. It's definitely not level in a lot of places. But I think like just raising awareness for the issue in general and this legislation will do a lot to make it level. So that's why I'm so, passionate about it.
Now, in terms of education, have you run into roadblocks with access to like education? That if have you worked within that institution? Have you got some issues that you want to talk about there?
Not very many. Um, I'm grateful that I had a awesome public school system and an awesome college system. Um, of course, I've had like two, like I think two teachers or three teachers in my entire academic career have given me issues, but for the most part, they've been awesome. So
That's cool. But you did run into a couple people, but
yeah,
not
I
not
did run into a couple people, but there are bad apples everywhere. So
yeah. But that's good that you had, at least you would hope that in those places people would be enlightened enough to like want to assist without being a hindrance.
yeah,
So that's good to hear.
yeah.
But other places in life that maybe people don't think about, um, where there are challenges that maybe you can kind of illuminate.
Um, just like that being accessible is not just having like a wide doorway, like that's part of it, but it's
Mhm.
also having a bathroom that a modern day power chair could fit in, which not many places do.
Mm.
um I love when they have single stall restrooms because it's guaranteed that my power chair can fit into a single stall like family restroom. um it's having like if you have a disabled employee, like it's having a desk that they can get up to, or letting the caregiver that most likely they pay for, the state pays for, come in with them and like not be weird about it and be respectful of her or him. Um, all of that stuff. So
Yeah, that's interesting about you're having that power chair and then the stall's not being wide enough for it, so you have to use like the non-stall kind of bathroom because they just haven't the standards haven't been adjusted for the tech of your wheelchair.
yeah, and also another big one is beside every handicap spot, there's a blue grid for people with ramps to put the ramp down. If they have one that loads from the side, I don't anymore, but if they have one that has a ramp coming out of the side, that's the space for them to put the ramp down. Luckily, I have one in the back, but if they have one in the side, that's the space for them to put the ramp down. And people use it as an extra parking space, and that's not what that's for. That's for people with
Oh, the
ramps.
ramp.
So
Oh, yeah, some people not understanding how the space is being used and then kinda blocking you.
yeah,
That
so
must be frustrating. Like, if you
it is. My dad gets more frustrated about that one than I do. And another one is if you have a Medicaid waiver and hire an aide, um, most likely, even if you hire the aide, they're paid through the state. After you hire them, there's a whole mess of paperwork that they have to fill out. And if you pay them through the state, they're only paid 13 something dollars an hour in Virginia, which
huh,
makes it impossible. And I had the best state in the union for Medicaid, regardless of politics. Our governor's like a good dude, so I had the best state in the union for Medicaid, and a governor that actually listens to people with disabilities and their families.
mhm.
And still, it's way too low. So it's impossible to get good people that stay because they're being paid so little.
Yeah, you do need to make sure that the workers are, you know, interested because, like, if you have a lot of turnover, you can't get I would think that you need to be in something a certain length of time to get good at it, and if there's a lot of turnover, then you don't get a lot of expertise, so then you're not really respecting the actual job, right? Because in order to have like if as a musician, I got to do like 10,000 hours to get good. Any job,
Yeah.
usually you got to spend a certain like time to get to be good. But if there's high turnover, nobody ever gets to be as good as they could be, right?
Yeah. So
So that's an oversight in terms of you can't just you have to have something that if you're going to have people in a position, you got to have people over a certain level of expertise, and that expertise should demand a decent salary 'cause it's a craft, right? It's a trade. And if you have it basically seems like they don't respect that trade. That if you're not being paid enough, then you're not respecting that what the person does, and then that
No,
doesn't respect you. Because if you don't respect the people who are in that service, then they're not going to be that great, and then that means they're not respecting you either.
no. So it's yeah, it's definitely they need to be paid more for sure and be paid what they're worth because not mine, but a lot of these have to do very complex medical things. And so they should be paid for that. And currently they're not being paid what they're worth, in my opinion. But
Yeah, then they're going to leave and they're going to try to get, they might get really good, and then they'll go move on to something where they get paid more, and then you lose what they learned. So
yeah.
that doesn't, you know, that doesn't help people in the position you're in. So are there stories that you'd want to tell people that are like some really interesting things that have happened to you that are very positive things in your life?
Um, I, on my podcast, I've had some really, really um cool guests. Like I had Aaron Moriarty from 48 Hours. And I've had Patrice, the movie director and producer, as we just mentioned. Um, I have a bachelor's degree, which not many people have in general, especially disabled people. So that's something I'm very proud of. Um, yeah, a lot of stuff positive stuff has happened to me.
So your outlook for this year and in the future, like what your goals are for your advocacy. What do you have certain goals that you want to reach? You have some milestones you want to make this year.
So, my goal at some point during this administration, currently that we have, is to get up to Washington, D.C. and start meeting with senators and such to encourage them to pass the acts that I'm advocating for and tell them why they're important. Get a job that actually pays so that I can save up money for my grand plan to exit these services altogether. Because that would give me a lot more freedom financially and just in life in general. Because I could actually get married and live with a partner, which is great. Because the marriage penalty sometimes a lot of times even applies if you just live with your partner as if you were married, even if you're not legally married. So
Hmm.
I could actually live with a partner and get married if either the acts got passed or I was off the services. So those are some goals that I want to work toward in the next year. Uh, in the next year to 4 years. I might go back for a master's if I feel like that would help me get into a career where I could be closer to this advocacy stuff. Um, so those are some goals that I would like to set.
I think that's great because it's good to have those aspirations and have a clear like vision, and that's it's cool that you want to go to Washington because not everybody's willing to do that. That's that's a hard yeah, well it's it's really I think it's my major was political science, so I really believe in understanding yeah, you need to talk to your senators, you need to talk to your reps, you need to vote, you need to understand what the rules are, what how the bills are set up, and if you see something you don't like, then you let the representatives in Congress know so they can make the change. Because
Yeah,
you have
that's
to yeah,
uh
listen.
people would be shocked at how much I write to my senators, but that's my right as a citizen. So
Yeah,
I make my
it's
voice heard for
civics.
sure.
Like learn the civics. Like how does a bill get passed? They used to have a cartoon in the 70s. We used to see like
Oh
Schoolhouse
yeah,
Rock.
I'm just a bill. I'm
Yeah,
only a bill.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And people seem to have forgotten like how does it work? like you have to be involved, and it's cool that you're actually involved and kind of remind the public out there that like if there's something you want to happen, you have to be part of how it happens. So I think that's cool that that you're into that. Yeah, I think that's to be commended.
Yeah, I used to hate politics with a passion, but now I'm into it because I see that you can actually do good, and it's not just a bunch of people fighting all the time. So,
Yeah. I think it's awesome that you're out there podcasting. You're here with us today. You're an advocate. You got specific legislation that you've pointed out, that you've done the homework, and it's I think it's really good for people to hear stories like your story, which is not always heard in today's world. And I think we need to get on as many shows as you can and get your message out there. And I think it's great that you were with us tonight. I want people to go to your website, https willwithit.com, and check it out. We'll be fully clickable. And we were just on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and will be fully published by tomorrow. But it is live. It is going to be live. It's in the world on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube right now, and so those are active, and you can share those with your audience immediately. I think we sent you those links earlier, but I want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
you are so welcome. I had so much fun. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, and have a great night.
You too.